It's time for Transport Line, the program that showcases the contributions of all modes of transportation to the socio-economic growth and development of our country, Africa, and the rest of the world. Transport Line is being beamed to you from the Center of Excellence, the state of aquatic splendor, and Africa's fifth largest economy, Lagos. I am Shino Ilegbede. Thanks for being part of the program. Precisely a week today, Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu announced the appointment of Dr. Kayode Okoye-Ifa as the new Managing Director of the Nigerian Railways Corporation, NRC. Since the announcement, majority of stakeholders in the transportation sector, they've commended the appointment in the sense that they see Dr. Kayode Okoye-Ifa, who prefers to be addressed as comrade, as a round peg in round hole. So we expect him to hit the ground running. That notwithstanding, we know that Comrade Kayode Okoye-Ifa is not really a greenhorn in the transportation sector. Remember, and you recall that Comrade Kayode Okoye-Ifa was at one time special advisor and commissioner for transportation in Lagos State when Babatunde Raji Fashola, SCN, was on the saddle. Well, today Transport Line is going to chip in few advice to him on how to really make Nigerians feel the impact of him being on the saddle and assist in making sure that the economic life of the average Nigerian improves. Because today, when you take away security and food, then we are home dry. When we have adequate food supply, with correct purchasing power for the average Nigerian to do it, to purchase, and of course, the ability to sleep with your two eyes closed, then everybody will be fine. So today on Transport Line, precisely, we are going to look at the roadmap for new managing director of the Nigerian Railway Corporations. In fact, the task ahead for him. Remember that nobody knows everything and everybody knows something. Hence, we are going to chip in these few advice. And I have on set a transportation expert in the realm of railway, Paul Ndibe, who is going to assist me in this discussion. Paul, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Paul, Comrade Kayode Okoye-Ifa is here. Also one time, Executive Secretary, Transportation, Federal Capital Territory. And also one time, leader of the team of the Presidential Task Force to decongest the Apapa Port. So everybody is really looking ahead to see that, yes, the good old railways of the past will be revived. What is your take on this?
Yeah, thank you. Interestingly, Dr. Okoye-Ifa covered all these areas you mentioned, and recently served on the board of the Nigerian Railway Corporation. So, to me, he has been exposed to issues around the railway, having served on the board. But beyond that, he's also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. So, by all indications, I would say that he has the capacity to hold that office. However, looking at the opportunities open to him, and then, of course, the challenges he has to meet, they are enormous. And nobody at this time that will head the Nigerian Railway Corporation will have all his eyes closed at all times, because the challenges are there with slim opportunities. If we try to segregate them, looking at the challenges as aligned to the narrow gauge system, and then the opportunities
The standard gauge.
as also you can identify with the standard gauge. You see, there are two different worlds, and except he uses his number 6 for him to actually select a mix of the opportunities on the standard gauge and then address the challenges on the narrow gauge. It won't be easy, but I wish him well. And like I said, he's professionally qualified, and he has had some exposure, in transport-related matters. So I believe that he will do well, and then he has to open up more in order to really take the decision, hoping that the federal government will assist him with the necessary facilities you might be needing. Because if you look at it, the Southwest Rail development is coming up, the Kano Maradi is also coming up, and they are all heavy investment projects. If you look at the quantum of money that is being channeled to these two projects, it doesn't appear that government will also be fully disposed to, support development within the existing and open rail network. So that's a major challenge. And I hope the authorities will look at that and assist him, because for him, he has to actually define himself, show the professionalism in him by having more people to use the railways. That is the greatest thing he needs to do as urgently as possible. If you look at the standard gauge, for example, Lagos 2. Let us look at Lagos scenario, because that is the real thing. Abuja-Kaduna passenger is running. The Warri-Itape is also running.
On standard gauge.
On the standard gauge. Then the Aba-Port Harcourt on the narrow gauge. Even within Lagos here, the Lagos-Ibadan. And then, of course, the narrow gauge to Ijoko-Agbado and all that. I don't want to bring in the injection of access to railways being provided by Lagos State. That one is outside the environment we are looking at. Now, looking at Lagos-Ibadan, which is passenger service, he needs in the immediate term to increase the passenger volume on that axis, because the roads, of course, to Ibadan is clean enough and the transit time had dropped. There are maybe 3 things you may look at. One, the current transit time on that section, is it what should be prevalent? If they are started on a particular speed, has the track stabilized enough for the speed to increase in order to shorten the transit time? Traveling by rail Lagos to Ibadan in 2 hours plus, is it feasible? As against 1 hour, 20, 30 minutes on the road. No traffic. Looking at the schedule for the train, 8 o'clock and then 4 p.m. both ways, is it the most ideal schedule for the service? What if it is 6:45, so that people coming to work to Lagos can board the train at Ibadan, arrive here latest 8:30 or 9, and would not be too late to get to the offices? Is it also the fare the passengers pay on that service? So he has to look at these 3 things and see where the balance is. Assuming you have 2,000 passengers on that service and they pay 5,000, 10 million. The fixed cost on that service will always be attained once that service runs. But if you want to build patronage on that, you do some advertisement. You can re-advertise. And by re-advertise, you can bring down the fare. Even if it's instead of maybe the 5,000 they pay, the passenger volume can increase. You reduce the price or the fare. You have more passengers. Then advertise within that period. Once the advertisement period is over, you've been able to, the fare will still remain the same, but you'll be able to introduce more access to people. People will have more access to the rail, and when they have that access, you're able to retain them. And that will accompany rescheduling the schedule the timetable for the service, that he can do, so that that passenger train will always be well serviced in terms of passenger volume. We don't see it currently. So it is a matter that he has to build on. Then on the fares, on the rates, freight rates on the standard gauge, the distance from here to Ibadan is about 150 something kilometers. And the threshold for railway to recover its fixed cost usually is 250 kilometers. And this is 155. So it's less than the 250. So railway will invariably not recover its fixed cost or standard cost by running that maximum distance of 155. So it affects the rate the railway will charge in order to recover this cost. And that is why freight rates on the railway on the standard gauge to Ibadan usually higher than the road. And that is why there is low patronage on the passenger
So
service.
what's the antidote?
That one, it has to look at other incentives we might give to those, the logistics firms that you deploy railway facilities on those routes. Engage them, know their challenges, and see how they can be resolved internally. Additionally, you need to hold firmly on those logistics firms, because if we anticipate that government investment will slow in terms of the heavy projects they are undertaking on the rail on the standard gauge, to sustain this, you need to also have a firm hold on those logistics firms so that they can intervene in terms of areas of investment that will spur increase in the railway use. That is an additional thing it needs to pay attention to. If you look at the narrow gauge, of course, where we identify it as the bulk of the challenges, one, the locals on those plying those routes are weak. Their hauling power had reduced. So what will he do to increase the payload of locals on that train, on that service? Because with a shorter payload, you won't be able to recover your cost. So if you have a higher payload, which can be achieved through either refurbishing the locals or re-engineering the locals, they now have the capacity to haul more. When you haul more, your average cost will at least come down. You can compare favorably with the road. So that's an additional thing he needs to identify and address. Then the wagons are well, I wouldn't say they are weak, but they require either lifting or overhauling, and also lifting and overhauling. So it needs, and some of them may have weak wheels and sharp flanges. So there are a lot of things he needs to do in order to make the rolling stock, those the wagons and the engines, to be effective again. We cannot stop at maybe a lorry on the narrow gauge. The line is supposed to get to Kano. If the tracks are laid up to Kano, one immediate thing, well, mid-term now, that he needs to do is to ensure that there is this connection between the south and the north. If he would achieve that, that's a very landmark achievement that he will lay on the sands of time. But how will he do that? Is the narrow gauge fraught with challenges? Weak bridges, superstructures are down. So he needs the engineering department to really do more on that. The track may require reballasting in order to make the track elastic. When they're elastic, they can do more speed and reduce friction. That he needs to do. We've spoken about the local having enough hauling power in order to carry more load and reduce the cost in terms of revenue as compared with revenue on the wagons. Then on the bridges, the track, the drainages, the culverts, they all filled up. They need to be opened. And the track should not be weedy so that there will be reduced friction on the track. These are the challenges of, well, of course, the signaling system. Now, the NRC, they have a large pool of staff. It needs to look at that area and see where the staff, current staff, have greater skills and reposition them so they can make the best use of the staff. Some staff may have the knowledge and ability for a particular requirements of a department, but in a different department. So you need to do a needs assessment and then deploy the staff effectively. If he starts on those steps, he might be able to really have a firm grip on the railway and be able to push the services of the NRC up.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. From your own assessment and recommendation, one aspect indirect that you didn't mention or didn't come up clearly is the issue of financing, how you finance, how you fund. Federal government at present has many fingers in too many pies. And the way things are, we believe it should attract public-private participation. What do you think of this?
Interestingly, too, the NRC is open to, well, after the unbundling of the transportation sector, the NRC,
Buhari before he left.
Yes, NRC has been talking with some private investors. This is one area that it needs to also intervene, and very quickly. The issue is this: the NRC should develop models for private investors to come in. You don't wait until each private investor brings you the proposal. Develop separate models on the services you have identified to be privatized or for private investors to take over. Develop those models, find their cost, have their investment profile, and have the assets that they need to introduce in those sectors. Have them ready. If there's an offer, you present all the models, depending on the financial ability of the investor. So the investor will pick any of those models that you have already prepared and you are sure of. If you wait until each private investor brings their own proposal, you might not have the time frame and the scale to fully examine that. So this is an area he needs to do. Develop the models when they come, present your models, and let them choose. And they have to weigh also their financial capacity and then the ability to run the services. And then you pay with them. And of course, the injection of funds from these private entities will also be a cushioning, will have a cushioning effect on the paucity of fund that he might be receiving from the federal government on account of these bigger projects they are handling. Yeah, that's my contribution to that.
Another aspect has to do with the issue of corruption, which is not really restricted or limited to NRC. Virtually all facets alive is prone to corruption. And we've had cases of how people will tell you that standard gauge Lagos to Ibadan, or is it Kaduna to Abuja? One way or the other, the staff, they've devised a means of depriving the Nigerian Railways the earnings. Instead, they put it in their own pocket. What should be done?
Well, this is an age-old, story, I would say, but there are checks and balances. Of course, they have gone digital in terms of fares, fare collection.
Is there in Lagos, Ibadan, Abuja, Kaduna, they still deprive the Nigerian Railways, despite being digital? They just tell you the ticket is not available, what have you, and they say, okay, I will get you the ticket, but you are not paying, you pay cash to him. So how do we prevent that?
This needs to be verified because I'm aware.
I've read instances not only on social media, on newspapers. The immediate past substantive MD that left, they caught some officers. Unfortunately, as at the time he was leaving, we've not heard of what is the outcome of their investigation.
Okay, my response will just be short on this. Railway has a robust system for taking punitive measures against erring staff. If there are issues like that, of course, nobody should tell a report to do with the staff. But I'm aware that with the digitalized system of obtaining tickets, is more profound in terms of security of the ticket.
It reduces the level of corruption.
Correct. Then, of course, there are train ticket collectors on train. I don't think they are expected to collect fares on train. Because if you don't pay, you won't be able to have access to the passenger area where you will board the train. So that control measure, negates the tendency of any non or ticketless passenger being found on train, because there are control measures that will actually prevent you
to gain access
to the passenger area before boarding the train. So if it is, and then of course know that not all the stations have secured entrances. if they have secure entrances, that would help in terms of preventing such ticketless intending passengers from getting access. So there are a couple of things that you might do. The railway is old enough that all these things are not new. They ought to have had tested measures to prevent such occurrences.
Paul, let's look at the issue of security of railway corridors, stations, and generally property. You find out there's a lot of encroachment. But I will now take as a case study between Ido to Agbado, the level of encroachment. Aside the fact that you have many strange faces, two, you have people that have lined corridors with shanties, and yet nothing has been done. How can the new MD, Comrade Okpaifa, seek the assistance of the various state police commands, the railway police command, and of course the community leaders to make sure that you have a safe corridor?
Yeah, well, this is a serious problem that needs also very serious attention. The railway from beginning was not built with the intention of maybe protecting the track section. Well, maybe in Lagos State because it's area in terms of their track bed and limited areas on the land, but because of the track said to have been energized, people avoid it, and because of that, you don't have, the track being degraded by waste or stuff like that. So, but if you look at 3,505 kilometers open line on the NRC, is a large area, and it's not something that can easily be, safeguarded in terms of protecting the track, but it can be settled. There are some areas that they have mounted wire mesh, but they pull them down. Constant patrol would help, and also recruiting locals around the endemic areas on a particular fee to help protect the track. That may also help. And generally, maintaining a good speed. If the track is always open and you maintain a fairly good speed, you're unlikely to find all that. That does not mean that the Railway Police Command and the respective police commands of various states will not be able to intervene. So it requires also an initiative that the new MD may like to pick up and then have that discussions with them. It's important that the rail line should be safeguarded, if not for anything, for purposes of security and for safeguarding the infrastructure, which is the track, and then the rolling stock.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Finally, before we round up, we've spoken about how freight from the ports into the hinterlands can be moved and what have you. Ditto, issue of petrol, PMS, diesel be moved by rail. We should look into it because the level or the rate at which we have petrol tanker explosion on our roads is getting uncomfortable for the average Nigerian. But the final issue has to do with majority of those areas that are producing farm produce are not linked by road. You look at Niger State, you look at Benue State, you look at Sokoto State. What should be done? I know it's not something you can do overnight, but I think, like they say, Rome was not built in a day.
Yes.
So what can be done?
No. Let him try as much as possible, find the resources, connect and link up, and even in the meantime, on the narrow gauge, and see how sustainable it could be. That would help.
Good.
Thank you.
Paul Ndibe, I want to appreciate you always for finding time to come to us and let us tap your fountain of knowledge so that the society is better for it. Well, that's about we all have time for. Remember, continue to be compassionate to your fellow human beings. Please, times are still hard. Be your brother's keeper. By be your brother's keeper doesn't mean your blood relation. The next person is your brother, your neighbor, the person that genuinely seek your assistance. If that's your place of work, on the street, be careful on the street. Don't let anybody take you away. You should just be alert. But the key word is compassion. Till next time, bye bye for now.